Hello to everybody listening and welcome to the latest edition of the Legal Unicorns podcast with me, your host, Rob Green. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be welcomed by Leah Molatseli, who's up there in Johannesburg today. She is an incredible professional that I've had the pleasure of meeting before and is really, for me, really sums up exactly what the Legal Unicorns podcast is all about, which is people who are striving to do something a little bit different, taking the industry forward. By way of background, just to give you some bio on Leah, she's a lawyer, she's a published legal tech author, she's a speaker, she's a legal tech and innovation specialist, a founder of a business, and currently holds the role of head of business development at Legal Interact, which we will discover a little bit more about as we go along. I want to quickly run through some of her bio just to give you listeners a little bit of an idea of her background. I cannot mention every single one of your achievements, which have been phenomenal because we will be here till Christmas. But you're a guest lecturer at UCT, University of Cape Town. You're a Mandela Washington Fellow. I'm reading this off my other screen, by the way. A University of Notre Dame alum. You sit on the council, member of the University of the Free State, where you're a member of the ICT committee, chairperson of the naming committee and vice chairperson of the disciplinary committee. Part of the advisory board for the Global Legal Tech Hub and Women in Tech South African chapter. The Global Legal Tech Hub was on the socials yesterday, if anyone follows it, and I really want to pick up on that later. Your American Bar Association 2022 Women of Legal Tech honoree. There are so many other awards that you've won, which I'm amazed by. Institute for African Women in Law 2023, Women to Watch. We are delighted to welcome Leah to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
It's only a pleasure being here. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, look, I've got so much to ask you, but and I really want to understand more about the business you're working in and what you see for the legal industry and the way that the tech is transforming this incredible industry that we work in. But I really want to get to understand you as well. So if I may dive straight in, please, can you take us on a little journey of yourself? Where do you come from? Where were you born? And what sort of led you to where you are today?
Perfect. Well, I'm an only child, so that could sort of make sense around the attention-seeking vibes.
So am I, by the way. So am I.
I was born and bred in Bloem. I stayed in Bloemfontein in the Free State for a very, very long time. I actually only recently moved to Johannesburg a couple of years ago. And then I went on to study at the University of the Free State. I was just a loner a lot. So a lot of my childhood was spent indoors reading, watching too much TV for my own good. And that's actually where I fell into law. Because I was watching your Ally McBeal, The Practice, the typical.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, at that point, when I went to study, it was just that thing. Okay, I want to be a lawyer. But which is something I discovered later on in my career around how I'm actually very strategic in my thinking. Because as young as I was, it clicked in my head that, if I want to be a lawyer, I need to be able to be articulate. I need to be smart. And lawyers are seen as leaders in society. So I did a couple of things while I was in school. Obviously, I studied hard. I joined debating. I took up public speaking. I started taking up leadership roles. So literally in primary school, I was like a prefect. High school, I was the head girl. So every single thing, it's very rare that I do something and I've not thought it out like 5-10 years from now, And so, of course, I went on to study at the Free State. Second year, tiny little bump. Second year of law school, I became a mom. I was 19 years old to two beautiful twin boys. Pretty hard.
Oh, so not just a mum, but a mum to twins as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Wow.
boys. I just need to qualify
And
that
boys.
in terms of energy level,
Yeah.
just so you understand. It was pretty tough. I'm not going to lie. I always say if they don't turn out to be lawyers, I'd be very shocked because there were multiple times where, whether during the pregnancy or when they're younger, I was literally studying, telling them, when you study out loud, you read something
Yeah,
and you
yeah, yeah.
share that conversation you have with them. And after that, I got qualified. And then I transitioned to the UFS Law Clinic, which I think it was such a great foundation because a lot of people, especially after articles, sometimes they either go to the big firms where they're semi limited or to the small firms where they're not really doing the type of legal work that they should be doing. But the foundation that I got from the law clinic is that it was actually very broad, so across the spectrum. So from criminal, civil litigation, family, labor law, you touched all of it, and you actually got to go to court, which is why some of us studied law because you saw people in court. You're like, hey, I want to be those people, and you got a lot more responsibility in terms of taking ownership from a client from the beginning in terms of the onboarding of it up until the end of the matter if you got a chance. And then from then on I went to a smaller practice still within Bloom, and then I realized, oof, I'm a mom, money's not enough, and I need to do something different. So very early on in my career I discovered that there's actually power in socials, in social media, in putting things out in the internet. So I actually built a tiny website, WordPress. It was leahmolatseli.wordpress.com. And then it was like a internet version of my CV. I wrote what I was
Okay.
doing, even though it wasn't much at that stage because I was still very early on. But I was sharing. Today I went to court, I did this. And that's how I actually got discovered by one of the biggest firms in the Free State. One day I go in, hey, want us, can you join us? And so I did. So I joined Patswani Heni, I think 2013, still very young. And then there I just focused solely on labor law and the learning from that. Because remember, I came from the UFS Law Clinic. Then you go into a tiny practice where you sort of do everything. Labor law, even though I did touch it a bit, it wasn't my specialty. But the biggest learning from that transition was around making whatever it is or situation that you're in your own. So even through that, I recognized, oh, it's not my strong point, but I'm going to study so hard. I'm going to put in everything and I'm going to make myself a thought leader in that tiny little way that I can. So I wrote articles, I published. I even signed up for News 24 Voices, wrote about labor law, the CCMA. What do you do if this happens? Those type of things very early on. I don't know, maybe it was intuitive or what, because the thing about lawyers, we sell intangible services, so someone needs to be able to have that level of trust. And when you come from my type of background, I'm young, middle class type of family, I don't have the connections, and you're trying to also build a name, trying to build a client base. One of the most effective ways that I discovered was literally just putting yourself out there. Um, it worked for a while, and then I don't know. When you reach, I used to call it my. It's not midlife crisis. It was like a quarter life crisis. Because for a very long time, the goal was be a lawyer, be a lawyer, be a lawyer, be a lawyer. Now you're a lawyer. You got admitted. You did all the things that you needed to do. But now what's next? So I had to come to a decision around what type of impact do I want to get, and in a way that also allows me to give my children the type of life that I want them to have. And I mean, we don't talk about this enough. The environment in traditional law firm spaces is actually not that conducive for mothers. The type of modeling around it really isn't. And so for me, I had to make a decision. How are you still going to do law, but in a way that makes sense for you? And that's where Lenoma Legal was also born. So I decided, yo, it's been good. I've got the experience. I'm gonna call it. They say millennials we like humping, but it's not even about that. It's about purpose. We're actually more. Well, I speak for myself. I'm more purpose driven versus. No, I'm not cracking it. No, it's more about aligning your work to your own purpose or mission and what you believe you can achieve within the spectrum of who you are. And so I transitioned into a startup. Tough. Yeah, when I think about it, I'm like, shush, Leah, you could have taken like at least 2 years to think it out. Um, but yeah, I just took the jump and it was a crazy ride. Initially, it was supposed to be just a consulting, tiny little firm. But then at that stage, I had gotten married, I had another baby, another boy. So you can imagine my life. So you're starting a business, you have a newborn, and you need to juggle all of that. So for me, the biggest challenge I remember, I had a client that I needed to meet. And because obviously, it's a consulting thing, I'm working from home, and I couldn't go because the nanny didn't pitch. Luckily, I reached out to the client. I'm like, hey, can we rather Skype? I'm probably revealing my age, but yeah, I'm like, hey, can we rather Skype this conversation? And then the client agreed. And literally, that was probably the most career defining moment for me in terms of how I actually ended up in legal technology. Because after
Okay.
that, I then realized, hey, I don't need to leave the house to do what I want to do, which is, drive impact with law. And that's how I actually started researching, trying to understand what's going on. And that's when Lenoma Legal switched into a legal tech. So we built a platform, went through all the stresses of building a tech startup. Went good for a couple of years. And then later on, it just wasn't, actually had a tiny, tiny little tiff with my co-founder. And I'm like, you know what? I know what it takes to build, and there's nothing that will actually stretch you emotionally, financially, spiritually, than actually building from scratch. And I'm like, I can't start from scratch again. I just can't. And now I've always had children, but now there's that conflict between your dreams and literally reality being a mom, and the fact that your kids are grown. Very soon they'll be in varsity. So you gotta make a choice. And I don't know about you, but I'm one of those people that can actually rationalize myself into and out of anything. So at that point, I rationalized, I'm like, look, the end goal for you has always been, since you discovered legal tech, has always been legal tech. And that is why, even as I was running the startup, I was doing multiple things, advocating for it through speaking, traveling, writing, publishing a book about it, writing about it on LinkedIn, or whatever opportunity it was, teaching about it. So the core goal, the essence of it, is driving impact through legal tech. It doesn't necessarily need to be under your name or under you as a legal tech startup founder. And that is how I actually also ended up here at Legal Interact. So I just reached out to my current boss on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm transitioning. Do you guys have anything? And lucky enough, they were actually looking for someone in PD. And here I am.
Wow. That is quite a journey. I've got so many questions for you. I really have. It's the first time in a very long time that I've got the pad and pen out. So as you were talking, I was leaning over, going, I can't let this. That is an incredible journey so far, and I really want to get into legal interact and what that is all about, and how it's helping the industry. But I want to work from the start. For those people who are perhaps listening to this podcast from overseas that don't really know South Africa that well, The easiest way to describe Bloemfontein, and I will say it because obviously I am not from here. I've been there a number of times. I've got friends who live there. It is a small city. Has one of the top schools, Grey, if I remember rightly,
Yes, great.
in the country. It's probably fair to say that it's seen better times as a city. It's fallen on some hard times, which we won't go into now. This isn't a political podcast, but it's had some tough times recently. But it's got big industries, and you know, I know Transnet are up there, and SA Truck Bodies and companies like that. There are big employers in the city. So but it's right in the middle of the country, right? It's quite dusty. As it were.
Very agricultural.
Very agricultural, very industrial, and trying to give that impression. But so to come out of there and to really push yourself and your career towards one of the major cities is an amazing achievement that not everybody can do. And I'm sure that will probably reflect. Or people from overseas will be able to understand that in their own country. They'll have an example of a much smaller industrial agricultural city, and trying to get to the big city is sometimes quite hard. To do that as a young mother of 2 twin boys as well, remarkable. I think, I hope that, you know, I'm not doing you a disservice here, but from what when I was listening to you, what I'm listening to is a professional who has, you know, has been very capable of whatever's put in front of her. You clearly just don't stop. You sort of navigate whatever's in front of you, and you know, obviously families are incredible. But at such a young age, it must have been very difficult at times. But you just carried on, and you keep working harder, and you continue to drive forward and keep driving to where you are. So I don't want to seem sarcastic if I say congratulations on getting through that. But you know, there'll be people listening to this who are in the middle of that similar journey, who may be young professionals who've also found themselves with a young family. And I hope they listen to this and they see that, you know, you can continue to reach the top if you keep going. So, you know, that's very inspirational. It really is. So when did you start with the Skype with the client? Because you might be a pioneer. You might, if it's before, well, clearly it's before COVID, I guess, but you might be one of the first.
It was before COVID. It was late 2016, because I remember we launched the platform, Learn Eagles platform, on my 27th birthday in 2017. Actually made a whole big deal out of it. But yeah, it was still very early on. You know, that's why it's so incredible. I'm always struck when I see all the new players coming into the market on the continent or in the country. And it's a wonderful thing to see, and also to know that they're actually not alone. It's such a hard thing when you're seeing something in your head and you're just pushing and you're literally in bloom and no one gets you. They think you're crazy. Like, just do your job, go to court, come back. Like, what are you doing? You know, but yeah, it's been wonderful to see.
I can concur with that. I myself also grew up as an only child, and grew up in a very, very small town in the south of England. And there's many times I remember being quite frustrated why I didn't have a voice, and why, you know, trying to get myself to the big city where I could achieve whatever that was inside me, that hunger, that desire. And I had ideas, but no one would listen because I'm stuck down in that little village down there. So I kind of, I can concur with that. But I do think it's I've got so many questions, but it's so amazing that you adopted technology to your own consultancy work, then you develop the platform with your business partner, and then so you've clearly you've always embraced technology and how it can improve the way you deliver your legal services.
Agreed. I think once I discovered that, it sort of shifted my view because sometimes, yes, it can be a bit of an ego trip being a lawyer. But at the end of it, it's literally about delivering quality legal services. Whether you're viewing it from a business perspective or you're viewing it from a human rights perspective or whatever it is. And recognizing that a bit early on in my career allowed me to actually make that switch and understand that, okay, there are a couple of ways that as a lawyer you can impact change. It's either you can literally litigate your way through it to the highest court, do what you can, or be part of, drafting legislation or teach. I think academia is one of the most underrated spaces in the legal sector. But also, you can be what we do here, for example, at Legal Interact, literally form part of the business side, the operational side of legal, and actually help lawyers do it better or more efficiently, or look at how or challenge them in their thinking around how they're delivering legal services. But the end goal should actually be ensuring that your clients get the best legal services.
This is something that we talk about here in our offices every day, and it's something I really want to unpack with you because I think it's something that is kind of, how do I say it, the impact that legal tech is having on the legal industry is frightening for some, and incredibly exciting for others, and really. There is a whole heap of millions and millions of legal professionals in the middle ground that aren't quite sure how to utilize it and what to utilize. But there is no doubt that the legal market is being completely transformed by the influx of technology, and not all of the technology that's coming out is useful. That's the case with every industry, but I don't think I've ever seen an industry that is going under such incredible transformation as the law, with that sort of power of the technology coming through. So if we can start digging into that a little bit more as well. So if we go back into your career for a second, so like you say, you're in Bloom, you're specialising in, you've joined one of the top firms, you're specialising in the employment space. Now, again, for those of people who are listening overseas that don't necessarily know this, labour law and employment law in South Africa is an enormous part of the corporate and commercial industry. Like in some other countries in which we work, it's a smaller part of, it's just a bit part, but here it's humongous. So it's an area that has many thousands of specialists, and so it's a tough area. You in 2016, as you say, you start Lenomo Legal, and just to clarify, the Lenomo Legal, that was your own firm, your own consultancy, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, and that's really with your business partner specializing in employment law, right?
Employment and commercial. But okay. I figured, because you know how it started, okay, beyond wanting to leave, how it actually started was, I mean, I've always liked things. So even when I was employed, there was this course at the University of the Free State. One of the top VCs from Cape Town was actually part of that particular course. It was something around innovation and entrepreneurship. I knew I needed to make my next move because I know I think different. Because sometimes it's okay to be different. And I knew that I was supposed to leave, but I didn't want to leave without some knowledge or baseline. Hence, I took up that course while working. In any event, I mean, there is no way that you meet a startup founder or a dreamer or an innovator and not be changed. You're crazy. Like, you have a problem. Like, if an entrepreneur who is passionate about what they're doing and they're sharing their journey or they're sharing whatever it is that they're doing, and you are not touched, you are not inspired, or something doesn't shake you, like, you are the problem. So during my class, I mean, obviously there's a bunch of us in there. And at that stage, I also had a side hustle. I've always had side hustles. I had a side hustle. It was like a nanny business. Because, obviously nannies, children, blah, blah, blah.
And your nanny didn't turn up for that one time.
So,
So,
so I was like, hey,
solution. Yeah.
solution. If I have a problem,
I like
find
it.
a way. Yeah. So then even during that class, I met a bunch of them. And one of their biggest pains, because you talk, who are you? And I'm like, no, I'm a lawyer. They're like, you're a lawyer? Do you know how much you guys are expensive? Do you know how intimidating you guys are? Do you know I'm a startup founder? Now I have to find money to travel to you. Do you know, like, all of these pain points that they were giving? So Lenoma Legal, whether it was in the form of a consultancy or as a straight up legal tech startup, its baseline was always about the small to medium business people, because they're actually the bedrock of our economy, whether we like to admit it or not. And because legal fees are so high, it's so difficult for them to actually keep moving, keep running. And so part of my, I thought, differentiator was around, hey, I can make it easier for them to actually intercept and interchange with the law. If one, I make it a bit cheaper, and with tech, you actually can. Because think about it. I mean, at some point, when I think back, I had like a bunch of lawyer friends drafted contracts, you plug them up on the platform. It's residual income, like literally. You don't have to do anything after that. So it does away with the timing from my end. It also does away with the timing from their end. So predominantly from a legal specialist perspective, it was around their challenges from a labor perspective, from commercials, but predominantly it was around their contracting, what they're doing, how they're doing it, figuring that out for them.
So the platform you mentioned, Noma Legal, was what, more that they could access templates and contracts and things like that? Is that for a fee or?
Yeah, think of it as, I think it's Zoom Legal in the US,
Okay.
or
Yeah.
Rocket Lawyer. Yeah, those were the folks that I was looking for in terms of inspiration, in terms of figuring out how can I do this best for my target market. Yeah.
Own the future of recruitment today. Access a secured, anonymized global talent pool. Connect with qualified candidates through multiple private label databases. By creating your own Stintit, you can achieve the following. Step 1. Access your company dashboard by logging in. Step 2. Click Find Candidate to search for the ideal candidate. To begin, create a new position and fill in the necessary details. The system will search through multiple databases to find the ideal match for you. Step 3. Once the search is completed, you will instantly receive multiple 100% matches which have all been fully verified and KYC checked. Step 4. When the candidate chooses to opt in, you can view their skill set and experience. Only when you are satisfied, use your credit to unlock the candidate's full profile. Once unlocked, the profile remains unlocked for all future searches. What makes this system truly revolutionary is that when you search, the search will continue in all the different databases until a 100% match is found. Each database involved and the candidate share in the revenue, and that's how this circular revenue model and shared database benefit all parties involved.
Yeah, that's really interesting because that is the one of the major shifts I've seen in the law, and that's the is the sort of one of the key driving factors. I mean, I for change. I've been saying this for years. Is that, and I saw it more so when I was living in Asia. So, as listeners know, I spent nearly a decade in Asia before moving to South Africa. And one of the things I saw was because there was such a big emphasis on Chinese clients, a big emphasis on the Chinese clients with the money, building businesses, building roads, whatever they were doing. But they were calling out the cost element, and it was and that was pushing this drive to find alternative ways of delivering the legal services, which was a real change for a lot of the law firms who are just so used to either charging a huge, great flat fee or the dreaded hourly rate, which everyone seems to want to do away with. And so it's interesting from what you're saying there, because again, when you're dealing with the entrepreneurs, you're dealing with SME businesses, again, prices was one of the big key factors. Well, accessing good law and a good lawyer like yourself, but also at the right price point. So it's interesting that you say that. So how did that business go? Go on.
Yeah. While you're there, I think, and that's why in my bio you see a lot around global community and so forth, and especially in terms of how I started. The legal tech community globally is probably one of the most welcoming, one of the most understanding, one of the most patient industries you could ever find yourself in. And I think that is solely because, as you correctly said, in terms of some of the similarities, it's because we all understand. We literally, sometimes when I think about lawyers, it's like we're all built literally from the same school. If I could say it from a children perspective, you'd say that we're from the same parents, in terms of how we act, how we do things, how the system is built. And so the challenges were actually the same. And even back then, I literally found solace in my global colleagues around, I have this thing, I need help with this. I can't understand how this would work. How have you guys, because they're a bit further ahead, you could get some accelerated assistance in terms of, these are some of the challenges that we face. This is how we dealt with it. So it sort of helps you also in your thinking around how you can problem solve the situation.
Yeah, and I think again, I want to. There's so much going on in my head at the moment, but some of the things that you've just mentioned, I want to make sure that I get this in the right frame correctly. I think you mentioned yourself as a millennial, and it's something that I work on with my own platforms, and my colleagues are all millennials or Gen Z as well. And it's something we discuss a lot in terms of how in one generation, from my generation, which is Gen X, through to millennial generation, and now to Gen Z, how things have changed. And there was always this misconception, mainly fueled by Western media, if I must say, that millennials are lazy. And that is just strictly not true. It is not in my experience. If I have to read another thing that's listed on the BBC website about the millennials aren't hardworking, etc., it's total nonsense. And take it from me, who spent 20 years in the recruitment and staffing industry, I know that is complete, dare I say it, BS. What the change is from generation to generation is then the word that you use there, which I wrote down, is purpose. Is that something that you're driven? Obviously this is a vast sweeping statement, but largely the next generation is driven by something different and driven by having a purpose and doing things in a fairly and doing things in a way that is much more community based. And that leads on, and to full circle back to what you just said there, which is also my experience of the legal tech industry or the legal tech suppliers that are coming into the industry, that it's just one of the most friendliest, open, sharing places, I've ever dealt with. I mean, if you go to, again, a sweeping statement, but if you go to a legal awards ceremony, there's a lot of one-upmanship and I'm amazing and, a lot of egos and this, that, and the other. And a conference can be the same. In that traditional law, when we've been to, and I obviously met you first at the Legal Innovation Festival last year, when you sit there, you're talking and you're just sharing everything with everybody. Everybody's talking about what they're doing, what their plans are, because everybody's in the same position.
Boat. Yeah.
Same boat. And and that's really refreshing, because I think it's a case of the way people want to work, the way they want their legal services delivered, and the way that things are charged for, and the influx of tech are the four big cornerstones of how this industry is changing. And it's so great to see someone like you really leading that way. Can I just ask you, I'm getting this impression of you as a professional and as a person who's always been driven. Like I'm just picturing you as a young child and then getting into university, who's just always you're always on the front foot. Is that right? Is that someone who's always...
When I mentioned, I discovered later on in my career around my strength in strategy. So we did, and I mean, you can take it, not take it, because I know some people are anti these tests. So I took, as part of the Mandela Washington Fellowship, they made us take the Clifton Strengths Finder. So some of my top strengths, literally top one, competitive. Like, don't start. Like, and maybe that's why I was so fit in terms of being a lawyer. But at some point, it can't be healthy. So I decided to turn that into me. I need to be in competition with myself. So I do like a yearly audit of myself in terms of, and it fits quite squarely next to my birthday, because my birthday is in January. So every December, very reflective. What have you done? New people that you've met, new skills that you've learned. Have you increased your net worth? Your children better? Is your mental health better? Have you done better for yourself? Like constant reflection, internal reflection. Are you improving? Are you becoming a better human being? Are you, it sounds tiring, but it actually makes you turn into a better human. Not just scathing through life. You wake up and no, like really, really being intentional about your growth, because I understand, not that I understand life, but there'll always be issues. You'll never be perfect. But the struggle needs to be different. So my struggles right now are totally different from a year ago, from 2 years ago, from 3 years ago, as it should be. So next year, the conversation around what my challenges are, whatever, should be totally different in terms of this year. And that's how you can also measure growth around how you're developing, how you see life, how you see yourself. So yeah, it was competitive. So I've always been like that. Always. Could never do one thing. That's why entrepreneurship was suited for me. And probably while this role is also suited for me, because biz dev is everywhere, literally everywhere. So could never do anything. The other strength was woo. It's WOO. It's called winning others over. Even though I actually don't.
Perfect for BD, by the way.
Like, it's just a natural, innate talent to just draw people to you. And another one was around, I think, starter. Like, you just start stuff. So you can't think of stuff and just not do it, because I feel like it'll always gnaw at you. So you need to start it and see it to the end, figure it out. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But then you've learned something, or you've achieved something, and you keep it moving. So it's a continuous journey. But yeah, in short, I've always been like that. Yeah.
I find it really inspirational. I'm not just saying that. I just think I find there's a lot of similarities between us both, and maybe over the next cup of coffee that we have next time I'm up in Joburg, or when our paths cross, we can explore it further, because I find myself very similar. But I think if anyone's listening and doesn't do the yearly self-audit that you do, I think it's a good idea. It's something that hopefully people could take away from them. But do you actually go, like, do you sit on your own? Do you go away? Or do you spend an afternoon just really writing things down, really genuinely reflecting?
Yeah, literally genuine reflection. I think the beauty, sometimes being an only child is hard, but the beauty about also being an only child is that you can be by yourself. There's a lot of people that are fighting whatever it is that they're fighting, and they can't be alone. So they distract themselves, whether it be through drinking, whatever, work, friends, let me go out, let me do, like, but the beauty
The phone.
or the phone, socials, but literally the beauty of having grown up alone is that there's power in stillness. There's power in just being. And I understand myself enough to know that throughout the entire year, because I know I'm going to be pushing myself, I'll always be running. Always be running, 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 running. And at the end of the year, it's just literally a time for me to literally sit and be still and properly reflect and say, okay, this is what you did. This is what's next for you? What does it look like? And funny enough, typically the quarter of each year, that sort of ripples into what the rest of the year will look like. So even if I plan like the big, big, audacious goals for the following year, the first 3 months are typically where a whole lot of huge things happen for me professionally. And it actually has a rippling effect for the rest of the year. It's like you're sorted, not that you're sorted, but like you've received, done these huge things. So for example, this year for me was the ISF fellowship. We went to California, literally was in the same room with a billionaire. And that's like sets you up for the rest of the year. You're like, oh, okay. Yeah. So there are a couple of things that happen, and I've learned to accept my journey. So through reflecting, it really it centers me, because, like I said, for me, work is, I don't want to say personal, because there's also another school of thought here you personalize your work. But here's the thing: you spend so much time doing whatever it is that you're doing, might as well enjoy it, might as well make the best out of it if you're going to do it. So for me, it's also consolidating everything and questioning myself. Is this still part of your purpose? And is it still giving you the type of fulfillment that you need to keep moving? Because there'll never be enough money. There'll never be enough benefits. There'll never be enough, you understand? So there needs to be some intrinsic type of motivation that keeps you moving. So for me, during that reflection time is that time I really sit down with myself and understand, am I still on my path? Does it make sense? All of it.
I think some of our listeners are going to really find that so beneficial, because I think that not enough people do that. Not enough professionals do it, regardless of their age. When they may have, if they've never done it before, some of the listeners may be in their 50s, 60s, they may, or even much, much, much younger. I would implore everybody to do something similar and to learn from Leah, and to say, and to have once a year where they really reflect and go through that journey that you've just mentioned, which is obviously, am I still on my path? I just wanted to have a quick question. Do you give yourself a grade for last year? Do you give it, with that competitive edge? I wonder whether you give yourself a mark out of 10. Because you said that number one is competitive. I wonder whether you're always striving to give yourself a better mark.
No, my two core metrics that I measure whether I've leveled up or not, definitely income, net worth. whether it be core in terms of what I'm doing or any ancillary things, side hustles that I'm doing. At the end of the day, did they actually, is it better than the year before? And the second one is my mental health. That because my power, my strength, my ability to do what I do comes literally from my brain. Like I said, I can rationalize myself in and out of anything. And so if my mental health is not okay, then I have a problem. I won't be able to function. I won't be able to do things. So those are the two key metrics that I score. And if it's better, if I came across, whether it be a professional situation or personal situation where I handled it better than I would have previously, and my mental still came out okay, then I know I'm growing, then I know, oh, that's good. We're getting there.
I love it. I love it because it's the question of mental wellness is something that we discuss a lot here at the GRM group. I'm constantly talking about it with people because I've personally been on the good and the bad of that. I've had a 25-year career so far that's taken me all over the world, and like you, I've started businesses. I'm driven by startups, and I've gone through the journey and the growth journey and the ups and the downs of that, and obviously then also family, marriage, kids, moving, trying to make new friends, make new lives, etc., and all of those pressures that come with it. To check in with yourself and really make that a priority. I've met a lot of people, I'm sure you have as well, who don't have that as a core metric, if you like, and maybe lose sight sometimes of the fact that everything comes off that. It all starts here, and your kids need that to be well. Mine do too. The people who work with us, the clients that we deliver for. So I'm getting an impression of you of someone who is really, really very inspiring, and I'm really thankful for you to be this open with us. I think it's a really good thing that people can learn from. I really need to sit once a year and actually do a proper audit. So I'm going to be taking that away from this conversation for sure. I think you just touched on something there where you went to California. Sorry, what was that? I missed that. What was that with? Sorry.
Oh, so that's part of the Smith Futures.
Yes, the Smith International Strategy Forum.
Yeah. So recently this year, so they opened it up to African fellows. So we're actually the first African cohort to form part of it, where they spot international talent and they try to put us in a room to come up with things, provide a network for us, mentors for us, whatever it is that we need in order to get to the next level.
Did you have to pay for that, or were you invited?
Oh, no, please. No.
Oh, right. You were invited
I get that question all the time. I remember one of my cousin's wife, she once asked me, Leah, when you're traveling? And I'm like, you have to be strategic in life. I can't remember the last time I paid for an international trip, and I shouldn't, because you also, one of the biggest things I learned earlier on in my career, particularly the speaking side, because it's so hard for a person to monetize speaking, I'm like, okay, if you're not going to pay me, at least you have to pay for my travel, have to pay for my accommodation, because the insights I'm going to share, there's no other Leah in the world. There's no other Leah Molatseli. You can try, but you won't get them. And even if you do, they might not deliver it in a way that actually makes sense or speaks to the core or whatever it is. So it's also about having the audacity to own your uniqueness and put a value to it, to say that, no, I do this. This is how I do it. And there's a price to it,
Again, something that a lot of the listeners can take away from. And I think I completely agree. I think, it is very hard to monetize speaking and sharing of knowledge. And I think it's something that people want to tap into people like yourself, and even myself. I mean, I'm regularly invited, which is very kind of people. But yeah, there comes a price with that, because like you say, the way you put it there, the insights I'm going to be sharing is years and years of putting myself on the line and putting myself into difficult situations and getting out of those difficult situations, and that comes at a premium. You've just in this conversation so far, you've mentioned a couple of things which I sadly didn't write down, but I wondered if there's off the top of your head, what are the things that you've done in your career or decisions you've made that would probably be the most notable in your mind that have taken you to where you are today? Is there anything that really stands out and goes, if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have got this? Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, there's a couple. I believe in luck, and not luck like a lotto luck. It took me a very long time for me to understand that until sorry until I listened to Naval's podcast on the 4 types of luck. And it only then translated when I reflect, because I reflect a lot about my life, when I realized there are a couple of things that happened in my life that had I not done something or spoke to someone or reached out to someone, it would not have gotten me to a particular place. First classical example is literally how I got my articles. I'm sure, I mean, you're in the recruitment space, you know how hard it is to secure articles to become a candidate attorney in this country. The market is saturated, the expectations are horrible, but anyway, it's very hard. So in my final year, I was doing a mini thesis on criminal law. And I reached out to my criminal procedure lecturer to be my supervisor. She agreed and blah, blah, blah. We worked on it. But then she worked at the UFA's law clinic. And yes, at that stage, I was passionate about criminal law purely because she was probably one of the only lecturers that made sense to me, because she was in practice. So how a person teaches you when they're in practice versus just from an academic perspective is very different. So I could resonate more with her on that in terms of her material. In any event, through this interaction, obviously, we're working together. I'm like, hey, I'm going to need articles, blah, blah, blah. So we have a conversation. She's like, oh, we're actually opening up, blah, blah, blah. I send in a CV. It becomes so much easier to actually get in. So that was the first, where I realized you're actually mindful around who you connect with in order to get your end result.
Thank you for watching our podcast with Leah Molatseli. Subscribe for part 2 coming soon.